both veterans and civilians with their own, well, very personal VE Day and wartime memories. Along with that, I'm going to be joined by a wonderful array of experts who are going to be putting those experiences into the context of such a defining moment in British social and political history. And indeed, with me right now is historian James Holland, Kate Williams, Professor of Modern History at Reading University, and we can also welcome Winston Churchill's granddaughter, Emma Soames. So welcome to you all. If I can come to you first of all, James Holland, it is an obvious question, but probably a very important one for today. In a historical context, why is VE Day so significant?
Well, the reason that I was able to play cricket yesterday afternoon, the reason why we're able to enjoy a very liberal society and the freedoms that we have is because of victory in May 1945. And Britain's effort was absolutely enormous, and there has been this trend in, I think, recent years to sort of slightly downplay our role and suggest that we were hanging off the shirt tails of the Americans, and I don't think that's true at all. I mean, Britain's war effort was absolutely enormous, incredibly efficient overall in the whole war. And, should not be belittled in any way. And I think it's absolutely right that 70 years on, that we sit back and think about it and remember the sacrifices people made, but also that incredible united effort.
Professor Kate Williams, it's also, what is fascinating about VE Day was it wasn't just the efforts of our troops abroad that came together, but also the privations that people had suffered here at home, things like rationing, and also, there were very, very many people killed and injured by the bombings in Britain.
Yes, you're exactly right, Kirsty. And what James says about the sacrifice and the privations, I mean, that was countrywide. It was really a time of really pulling together and sacrifice in which the home front suffered hugely. They, as you say, rationing meant that people had a lot of hardship and struggle, and the Blitz and the bombing and the loss that people encountered of both possessions and friends, relatives and loved ones. It really was a time, I think, when it's fine. Obviously, for now, we look back at hindsight and we knew the war was going to end. Then, for many of them, they didn't know when it was going to end, when the struggle was going to end, and when the light was going to come.
Emma Soames, Churchill said, "Advance Britannia, long live the cause of freedom," and so say all of us. Everybody knew him as this great emblematic statesman. You knew him as a grandfather.
I did indeed.
What did VE Day mean to him?
Well, I was not born at that time, but it was from listening to his speeches. He was actually quite modest. He had the global picture. So he said we can allow ourselves a few days of celebration. He knew that it was by no means over, and not just winning the war in the Far East, but also the implications of Yalta. Potsdam, I don't think had happened. But he had a sort of global hold on the whole picture.
Well, we're very glad to welcome you to our little bandstand here today. We'll be chatting to you throughout the morning. After the service, which I told you about earlier, the crowds are then going to be, I'm sure, cheering on the veterans in a parade accompanied by military bands and by today's servicemen and women, crucially too. Anita Rani is at the start of the route to tell us more.
I am Kirsty. I'm on the edge of Parliament Square. Once the service is over, the veterans will be marching from the Abbey, along past the Palace of Westminster, down Whitehall to Horse Guards Parade. And on VE Day, this is where the throng had congregated to see the main man himself. Yes, there he is. He's got the best spot in the house. And 70 years on, the crowds have gathered in the very same spot. And there is a real sense of celebration here. Lots of Union Jacks poised, ready to wave.
You can say. Well, let's hear now from one lady who just happened to be with the young princesses Elizabeth and Margaret on VE Day. The Queen's cousin, Margaret Rhodes, shares her special memories with us.
It just so happened that my mother's youngest sister married somebody called the Duke of York. So the Queen Mother was my aunt, and therefore her children, Queen and Princess Margaret, were my first cousins. My home was south of Edinburgh, and about the age of 17, I went down to London and started working in MI6. It was quite interesting because I happened to be in the particular job where all the reports from all our spies all over the world came in. I did live at Buckingham Palace. I imagine that my mother must have rung up her younger sister and said, "My child is homeless in London." And anyway, I was given a bed and a sitting room in Buckingham Palace, which was wonderfully convenient because I was within walking distance of the office. I can't really remember the exact moment when I heard that the war was over. But I think with great foresight, the King and Queen decided that they should let their daughters out on the loose, so to speak. They'd never been out walking in the streets of London with hundreds and thousands of people all around them. And I know that for the Queen, it's an unforgettable memory. I do remember vividly walking up the Mall from Buckingham Palace. But we passed completely unnoticed. The Queen was wearing her ATS uniform. She had first pulled her cap right down in order to disguise herself slightly. And one of the officers who was with her said that he was not prepared to walk up in public with another officer who had not been dressed correctly. And so she was made to put her hat on properly. We went up to Trafalgar Square, and somehow between us we managed to get the hat off a Dutch officer. We then had the Dutch officer trailing us all the way, trying to get his hat back. We did go from there down Piccadilly and then across the park back towards Buckingham Palace. The crowds were thick round the gates, and we managed to wheedle our way through and get so that we were right against the railings. We stood there shouting, "We want the king, we want the king." And eventually the king and queen appeared on the balcony. It was a heaving mass of people, and they were all ecstatic, and everybody was shouting and laughing and screaming. It was relief, euphoria, happiness, you know, all those things mixed together. It was just a wonderful moment.
Relief, euphoria, happiness, some wonderful recollections there from Margaret Rhodes. And if you're interested in finding out more about how Britain planned its greatest party, then there's a VE Day guide on the BBC I Wonder website. Details are up on the screen. Let's just return to our guests here. Kate, it's very easy to think that the royal family was just sort of emblematic. You know, they came out and waved from the balcony and that was it. Actually, the importance of the royal family was really woven through the fabric of Britain's wartime experiences. Just tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, definitely. I mean, in the King's broadcast, in George VI's broadcast in Christmas 1940, he said, "This time we are all on the front line," and that's exactly what was the case. It was that they were part of the war effort, and they were part of the war effort in two ways. Partly because they refused to leave Britain. There was a lot of pressing initially that they should go to America or Canada. But the Queen Elizabeth then was very strong. She said that the children won't leave without me, I won't leave without the king, and the king will never leave. So they stayed in Britain, and the princesses were in Windsor Castle, but the king and queen were in Buckingham Palace, and there they remained. They visited the East End. They were bombed 9 times in Buckingham Palace, and they said, and the Queen then said, when we were bombed, I felt I could look the East End in the face. They were part of morale, but they were also, they had rationing. The royal family actually experienced rationing the same as everyone else in the country.
Did they really, though?
No more than 3 inches of bath water in the Windsor baths. That was it. There was a black line painted. And the princesses did these marvellous Christmas pantos in which they raised £800 for the war effort. So it really was all in it together.
James, I want to just ask you actually about Princess Elizabeth as she was then in the ATS. That seemed like a significant moment, you know, when she joined in with her war effort.
Absolutely, and the part played by women in the services was enormous. Some 467,000 people served in the Wrens, of the WAFs and the ATS as well.
And
so.
there she is. We hear that she actually learned to drive during her time in the ATS. Is that right? Emma Soames, am I right in thinking your mother was in the ATS?
Yes, she most certainly
Did she
was.
chat to you about it?
Yes, she did. Indeed, she did.
And what did she
used
have to say?
Oh, it was so noisy, and she put a finger in her ears and say, "Fire." And she was the first wave of women to join mixed ATS units. And at one point, when she'd finished her training, to be close to her parents, she was posted just half a mile from here in Hyde Park, where it was like a show unit run by an absolute dragon of a sergeant major known as Phyllis.
I'm sure she got things done, Phyllis. For now, thanks very much. I should tell you at home, in just over 40 minutes' time, the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh, along with other members of the royal family, will be taking their seats in Westminster Abbey. Let's say good morning to my colleague Sian Williams to find out more. Sian.
Good morning from Westminster Abbey, where Her Majesty the Queen and the royal party will, yes, arrive here just before 11 this morning for this special service of thanksgiving on the 70th anniversary of victory.